Welcome to a new episode of Leipzig Studies in Religion. In this series, we present publications by researchers from the Institute for the Study of Religion at Leipzig University.
And today we're jumping into a really fascinating intersection between sociology and history. Our deep dive is all about a piece by Christoph Klein.
That's right. The title is, and forgive my German here, Aus Differenzierung oder Aggregation. Oder Wie soll ein Religionshistoriker soziale Differenzierung verstehen?
Which translates, roughly to differentiation or aggregation. Or how should a historian of religion understand social differentiation?
This came out in 2022 in the volume Verstehen als Zugang zur Welt, Soziologische Perspektiven.
So Klein is a historian, and his specialty is Japanese medieval religion. But his mission here is, I think, crucial for anyone looking at religion on a global scale.
He's basically challenging the big established theories, isn't he?
Exactly. He's asking, do these grand macro-sociological theories, the ones that assume society just naturally splits into neat little functional boxes, do they actually help us?
Especially when we're trying to figure out how something like religion, with a capital R, even comes to be a distinct category.
Right. Particularly outside of that, pre-modern, non-Western bubble.
Because the classic theories, people like Luhmann, for example, they kind of treat religion as this thing that already exists and then just separates itself from the economy or from politics over time.
It's a process of differentiation, yeah. And that's the core tension Klein sets up. Is religion this universal, recognizable thing that just naturally separates itself?
Or is it something else entirely?
Or is the very concept of religion a product of history?
Right.
A contingent category that gets built by lumping a bunch of different things together. An aggregation.
And if you believe that second one, the whole game changes. It's not about how religion evolves anymore.
It's about how it's claimed.
Let's start right there with that problem of definition, because this is where he really goes after the foundations. He brings up that classic question from Niklas Luhmann.
Oh yeah, the Woran erkennen wir question.
How do we recognize that certain social phenomena are religion?
And that's where the historian in Klein just slams on the brakes. Luhmann assumes we can recognize it, that there are clear criteria.
Usually something about the immanent versus the transcendent.
Right. But Klein's comeback is so sharp, he says, we don't recognize if something is religion, we or others claim it.
Okay, so that's a huge swoop in thinking, right? Because if it's a claim, not just an observation, we're not looking for the essence of religion anymore.
No, you're suddenly looking at power dynamics, at the politics of classification.
Who gets to make that claim stick?
Precisely. And in our world, the category religion is, well, it's a massive political tool. It's used for self-description, for legal status, for control.
And Klein traces that tool back to a very specific place.
A very specific West European conceptual history, all tied up in the Reformation and the Enlightenment.
This is the Eurocentrism trap he warns about. We take this category, forged in one particular historical moment, and we just sort of splash it across all of history and geography.
And it becomes anachronistic. It leads to this endless circular debate among scholars. Is religion a subsystem? Is it a social field, like Bourdieu would say?
And the fact that no one can agree on a single definition.
For Klein, that's the whole point.
Oh.
The problem isn't that we're bad at defining it. The problem is that this thing called religion, is a fluid, imposed classification to begin with.
So if we throw out recognition, we need a new model. And that brings us to his core idea, this concept of Zuschreibung, or attribution.
That's it. He argues that being religious is not some essential quality that a phenomenon has deep inside it. It's an attribution. It's a label.
Like calling someone charismatic.
That's a great analogy. Charisma isn't a thing you can measure in their blood. It's a quality an audience successfully attributes to them based on certain behaviors. Religious works the same way.
But it can't be totally arbitrary. You can't just point at anything and call it a religion and have that stick.
No, absolutely not. And that's the nuance. A social phenomenon has to have certain qualities that lend themselves to being labeled religion.
It has to be receptive to the label.
Exactly. Klein uses these terms from psychology, like affordance or Afforderungscharaktер. The phenomenon has to afford that classification. It needs to be, in his words, religionisierbaron.
It has to be religionizable.
Yes. And that totally changes what a historian should be looking for.
You're not looking for the secret organ of religion anymore.
You're looking for the historical conditions that made certain clusters of human activity religionizable in the first place. So the questions shift completely.
Instead of asking how religion differentiated itself, you ask.
You ask, one, which social formations in history were ripe for being classified as religion once that modern category appeared. And two, what historical factors allowed those religionizable formations to emerge at all?
And that focus on the specific and the contingent, that's why he's so skeptical of those big, sweeping macro theories.
Yes, exactly. For a historian, those grand theories can feel, well, a bit teleological.
Meaning they read history backwards. They assume the present was the inevitable destination all along.
Right. It creates this deterministic trap. This group is a religion now, so its ancient roots must have always contained the seed of religion. Klein says we have to fight that.
We have to see the past as a place of possibilities.
A reservoir of non-realized possibilities, even failed attempts. We have to ask what other paths those elements could have taken.
So to do that, you can't stay at the macro level. You have to zoom in.
You have to go to the meso level. Look at religion as a concrete sociocultural formation, and that's where his big idea comes in, the aggregation thesis.
Okay, this is the heart of it. He says we should see religions as aggregate.
A complex, fluid, messy aggregate, a Bündel, he calls it in German. A bundle, or a cluster.
A cluster of what?
Of all sorts of different elements. Practices, symbols, institutions, texts, ideas about the world.
And none of those elements are inherently religious at the start.
Not at all. They just cluster together. They solidify into a recognizable bundle under very specific historical pressures.
And then the modern state shows up.
And that's when the real action happens. The state intervenes, and these aggregates go through a process of what he, citing other scholars, calls religionisierung.
They get religionized.
Yes, they get fixed, homogenized. The modern state basically creates a legal template. It says, to be recognized by us as a legitimate religious community, your bundle needs to look like this.
It's a checklist. Do you have doctrine? Check. Do you have rituals? Check. If not.
Then you're just superstition, or maybe a philosophy or folklore. You don't get the legal status.
And he makes a crucial point about the blueprint for that checklist.
He does. He says, more often than not, the unspoken prototype is a very specific model of Protestantism from Central or Western Europe. So formations around the world are judged on their family resemblance to that one very specific historical model.
This all sounds very abstract, but he makes it concrete with his own area of research, Japan.
And this is where it gets really illuminating. He looks at how the things we now call shiki, the Japanese word for religion, got their legal status as shukishujin, or religious corporations.
So he looks at the law. What did the state's checklist actually require?
Well, if you look at the 1939 law on religious organizations, the Shikidantai-hu, the criteria are a bit vague but telling. You needed a doctrine, or kyuki. You needed activities to spread it, senpu. And you needed ceremonies, kishiki.
So a formal structure.
A very formal structure. But here's the kicker, and this is Klein's key historical insight. For the big Buddhist denominations, this was nothing new.
They already had these things.
They'd had them for centuries. The Tokugawa shogunate, way back in the Edo period, had basically forced a denominationalization onto Japanese Buddhism as a tool of political control.
So they forced the temples to create registers, define their sectarian lines, and build up hierarchies.
Exactly. That political pressure centuries earlier had made Japanese Buddhism incredibly organized, incredibly structured. It made it highly religionisierbar.
It was pre-adapted for the modern state's checklist.
Perfectly. So when the modern category of Shukya arrived, it wasn't some radical new import for Buddhism. It was just giving a new legal name to a state-managed convention that was already deeply entrenched.
That's a fantastic example. But he makes the political nature of it even clearer with the counterexample.
With the Shinto contradiction, yes, this is the really mind-bending part.
Okay, so the Meiji government is trying to modernize Japan. And they classify the new charismatic Shinto movements, the so-called Kisha Shinto, as religious organizations.
Right. They fit the mold. But Jinja Shinto, the massive ancient network of traditional shrines,
the very heart of what many would call Shinto,
was explicitly denied the status of a religion.
Why would they do that?
For purely political and strategic reasons. The state wanted to use the shrines as the ideological backbone of the new empire. They needed it to be a secular national cult that every citizen participated in.
If they called it a religion, it would have become a private matter, separate from the state.
And that would have defeated its entire purpose. So political need completely overrode any kind of scholarly or theological definition of what is or isn't a religion. The label is a tool of the state, period.
Which means, if we want to understand this, We have to work backwards. We have to deconstruct the aggregate.
Yes, adopt an inductive approach. Start with the individual pieces, not the finished product.
And when you do that, you find that almost none of the pieces are exclusive to religion.
Not even close. Rituals. Law firms have them. Specialized agents with special knowledge. Doctors. Canons of sacred texts. The legal profession runs on them. A cognitive map of the world. That's what science provides.
So it's not the elements themselves that are special?
It's how they're bundled. And crucially, for what purpose? And using what means. This is where Klein talks about the decoupling of ends and means.
Let's start with the ends. He says these organizations provide Heilsguider.
Salvation goods or welfare goods. And they can be worldly, like health, wealth, success, or otherworldly, like a spot in paradise.
And historically, the institutions we now call religious, they did both.
They did everything. He gives examples of medieval Buddhist monasteries in Japan. They weren't just teaching the path to nirvana. They were running hospitals, building bridges, farming land, even acting as military powers.
So the economic goods and the spiritual goods were all bundled together.
Tightly coupled. And a big part of what we call modernization is the decoupling of those things. The state and the market get really good at providing the material economic welfare goods.
So the other institutions have to specialize.
They have to. And Klein says the key distinction is in the means they use. As society gets better and better at providing things through everyday means, through science, technology, bureaucracy, the social complexes that rely on außeralltägliche means.
Like extra everyday or ritualistic means?
They get pushed into a corner. They have to specialize in the problems that everyday means can't solve.
Which are, by definition, the transcendent ones.
Exactly. The most religionizable formations become those whose entire purpose is delivering extra economic and otherworldly goods, like salvation or ultimate meaning. And to do that, you first have to presuppose a strong distinction between the transcendent and the immanent.
But what about all the worldly benefits that are still offered? Like in Japan, the idea of Genzei Ryaku, praying for success on an exam or something.
That's a great question. But even when they do that, the action is framed differently. It's integrated into a comprehensive symbolic universe, a symbolische Sinnwelt.
So praying for success isn't just a transaction. It's part of a much bigger system of meaning that points toward an ultimate transcendent goal, like overcoming rebirth.
That framing is everything. It's what separates a priest performing a ritual for healing from a secular doctor prescribing medicine.
So in the end, he kind of comes back around to the big sociological theories, but from a different angle.
He does. He reconciles with them in a really smart way. He basically says that once you have that strong epistemic split between the transcendent and the immanent, once that idea takes hold in a society, it provides the perfect blueprint for building competing institutions.
Like the church versus the state, or the papacy versus the empire.
Exactly. Those institutional structures, which are built on that binary distinction, then become the social scaffolding for our modern legal categories of religious and secular.
So he's really trying to build a bridge, isn't he? Between the grand theories of sociology, the messy details of history, and the critical insights of post-colonial studies.
I think so, yes. The takeaway is that while the modern category religion is absolutely a contingent, political, and often Eurocentric construct,
the process that makes certain social formations available for that label isn't random. The aggregation has a logic to it.
and we as researchers can reconstruct that logic. So I think there are maybe 3 key theses you can take away from this.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, we should study religion at the meso level, as a fluid, complex aggregate, not just as a big, abstract system.
Second, the way those elements cluster and decouple is historically contingent, but it's not magic. Historians can actually identify the conditions and causes that make a formation religionizable.
And third, that strong focus on the transcendent immanent distinction is a necessary, though maybe not sufficient, condition for creating the social structures that our modern religious-secular binary depends on.
It really forces you to stop taking the category of religion for granted.
Completely. You have to ask, okay, what are the elements here? What historical pressure caused them to bundle up in this specific way? And who had the power to get that bundle officially stamped with the label religion?
So here's a final thought, something to chew on. If you take Klein's idea seriously, that religion is an aggregate of non-exclusive elements like rituals, texts, and institutions, then look at a powerful secular formation today. Maybe something like, I don't know, a global sports fandom, or even a deeply committed scientific project like deep-sea exploration. What would have to happen for that aggregate to become religionizable? What transcendent framing would it need to adopt? What extra everyday means would it need to start using to deliver its goods so that a future government might look at it and say, you know what? That looks like a religion.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that boundary is always up for grabs.
Thank you for listening, and we hope to welcome you back for another episode of our series, Leipzig Studies in Religion.